Hello and welcome to the NevilleResearch.com video. So today I'd like to go through some of my favorite Shakespeare books and give you some recommendations. So all of these books I'm going to talk about are valuable to read, and I'm going to explain why they're valuable and why they're important. So the first one I want to talk about is The Shakespearean Forest by Barton. And this is an absolute must read. It's a short book, and it puts all of the plays and poems and puts the forest within the context of the plays and poems. It shows you just how important and what a key theme the forest was in the works of Shakespeare. And it does it in a very engaging way. The book is based on lectures that she gave, and so it really is a fast read. It's an interesting read. And as you read the works of Shakespeare after reading this book and you see the theme of the forest pop up over and over again, it really gives you a very good understanding of the author and where they were coming from. So I really recommend this book. It's an easy read and a fun read. And on the same type of idea, is Emma Smith's This is Shakespeare. And I'm going to put this in the Guide to the Perplexed. And it's a quick read. The audiobook is fantastic. And it sort of gives you a perspective on the plays and sort of the depth of the plays from somebody who reads the text and watches performances and really gets you to appreciate them as works of art and the complexity of them as works of art. So it's a good introductory text for people who haven't read a lot of Shakespeare or watched a lot of Shakespeare, and it's good for somebody who has read a lot and seen a lot because it gives new perspectives and sort of a new take on things. So this is definitely a great book. Highly recommend it. Now, the next book I want to talk about is Diana Price and her book, Shakespeare's Unorthodox Biography. Now, this is a controversial book. It's about the authorship question, but it's a new perspective on the authorship question. She doesn't propose a specific candidate. She just looks at the overall picture of Shakespeare as author compared to the other authors of his time. His education, what documents have been left over of him, what evidence there is. It's a very interesting perspective. It's not going to get you to a solution of anything, but it's going to really clarify a lot of issues that people are confused about with the works of Shakespeare. Now, the next one I want to talk about is Hamlet and the Vision of Darkness by Rodri Lewis. Now, I'm calling this an eye-opener because when you read this book, you're just going to see things you never saw before in Hamlet and in other plays, because you're going to see the depth of learning that must have taken place by the author of the works of Shakespeare. You're going to see the cultural context, the Renaissance literary context of these works in a new way. So this book is a very literary style book. It's maybe a little daunting for some people, but I really recommend it if you want to get deep into Hamlet and just get a completely new perspective on the play and sort of what the author must have been reading and thinking about his whole life to produce this play. So it's a real eye-opener, and I recommend it. Now, for a problematic but useful book, I think the best example is Shakespeare and the Truth of Love, The Mystery of the Phoenix and the Turtle by James Bednarz. Now, this book is wrong about almost everything. So he gets every bit of his theory about the Phoenix and the Turtle and Love's Martyr is completely wrong. And frankly, he's very rude about it because he criticizes other scholars for their work. But it's an outstanding overview of the scholarship on this topic. So if you read this book through, you're going to understand the issues involved with Love's Martyr probably better than any book ever published. So it's a problematic book. His interpretations are obviously wrong, but it's a valuable book. So I do recommend it if you want to start studying Love's Martyr and understanding what an important text that is. Now, this book was recommended to me, and it blew my mind. It blew my mind, and I honestly, it's the number one, my number one must read is Shakespeare in the Hunt, A Cultural and Social Study by Edward Berry. Now, this book is so clarifying, so important, because it shows you the centrality of hunting in the works of Shakespeare and shows you how it was unique to Shakespeare, how Shakespeare was so interesting in hunting and hawking, how it permeates the plays from the very beginning, and how it's really a unique aspect of his work, compared to other playwrights of the time. If you want one book on this whole thing that I say you've got to read, the must read, you've got to read this book. It'll clarify everything about who wrote the works of Shakespeare and what they were interested in. And when you read the plays later, you'll have a much better understanding of them. So I strongly recommend this book, Shakespeare in the Hunt. Now, my next book is another problematic one, and everybody's going to be surprised that I'm recommending it, but this is by Jonathan Bate, and his book is Shakespeare and Ovid. Now, of course, Bate is a very problematic individual for the things he said about the works of Shakespeare and what he said about the Holocaust and other things. But the scholarship in this book is very enlightening, and it really helps you understand how classically educated the author of the works of Shakespeare was. So obviously his explanations for how the author could have known all these things the explanations are ridiculous, but the content of the book is valuable, and it is a recommendation, but everything he says has to be taken, with a grain of salt. Now, the next book I came across because I was researching Shakespeare and cannons, artillery, ordnance, and this book popped up, Shakespeare and Ecology by Randall Martin. This book is outrageous. He talks about Merry Wives of Windsor. He talks about deforestation. He talks about cannons. He goes in depth on the Tempest, all these issues, just connecting all the dots to how forests connect with the works of Shakespeare, the locality of Merry Wives of Windsor, the interest in cannons and canon production in the works of Shakespeare. It's all there in this book. I really recommend it. It's very text-focused, very interesting in how it brings in other texts of that period, so you get a background on coal use at the time, or charcoal and how it was produced, how deforestation, what was going on in producing iron and glass. It's just an outstanding book. I really recommend this one. It's a must read. It's not a hard read. It's easy to read. I really recommend it. Now, the next one is, I'm calling this a specialist take. And this is not the book for everybody. But I'm telling you, this book is important. It's John Donne and the Conway Papers, Patronage and Manuscript Circulation in the Early 17th Century by Daniel Starza Smith. This book is so interesting. We talk about the sonnets and how they were probably circulated in manuscript. And, obviously John Donne, and I've done a lot of work on John Donne and Shakespeare, and there's more to come on this. But this book really gets deep into the manuscript circulation and how these poems were shared among people on patronage networks, all this stuff. It's really interesting. So I really recommend this book to everybody if you want a specialist deep dive into a topic that's going to blow up in the future as really important for Shakespeare studies. Now, there is another book here that is a great work, and I'm going to say great because it's important. The author took risks in writing it, and it's just really the ultimate guide for the perplexed, and that's The Truth About William Shakespeare, Fact, Fiction, and Modern Biographies by David Ellis. And he takes a hatchet to the bad biographies that have been written about William Shakespeare. He obliterates them. He shows how they're speculating with no facts. He shows how they're making stuff up. He pulls no punches. Now, this is an Orthodox Stratfordian professor of Shakespeare, but this book is brutal. If you've ever read any of these, pseudo biographies by these people who are, trying to make a buck, read this book. It'll blow your mind. It's so well researched. It's so clear headed. This is one of the best guides to the perplexed you're going to find. Now, I've got 2 more books here. I'm not sure where to put them. I'm not sure if these are eye openers or specialist takes or what. But the first one is Shakespeare's Rome, Republic and Empire by Paul Cantor. And I'm going to put this in eye opener. And when I say this book by Paul Cantor, he has a lot of YouTube videos too on Shakespeare and politics. He has other books he wrote. And honestly, I don't think it matters which you go for. Watch the videos, read his other books. But Cantor is focused on the political meaning and message of the works of Shakespeare. He's a very good reader of Shakespeare. He's a very careful reader. And he'll really open your eyes what a political thinker the author of the works of Shakespeare was. So I strongly recommend Cantor's work, however you want to attack it. Now, this is another one here. It's a Shakespearean Republicanism by Andrew Hadfield. Book's a little problematic. I don't agree with some of the ways he goes about it. But the overall message of the book and the overall topic, Shakespearean Republicanism, is very important. And he has a very interesting takes on these ideas. And it's going to really open your eyes. So I strongly recommend this book. Maybe take some of it with a little grain of salt. But Shakespearean Republicanism will also talk to you about clearly the politics in the works of Shakespeare and sort of the Republican bent that some of the plays have. We don't want to overstate that, but there is a strong message there of republicanism in the plays and in the poems, because Lucrece also has that strong bent. So definitely check this book out. So these are some recommendations. I recommend all these books. Some of them need to be read with a grain of salt. Some of them, a little bit have good points and bad points, but definitely strong reads. Hope you'll check these ones out. Let me know in the comments if you've read these books, what you think. And I look forward to talking with you more about, great books and articles to read about Shakespeare, because there's so much been written and a lot of it really is helpful in understanding the works.